Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I have another interview for us today. These have quickly become my absolute favorite podcast episodes. So today I have Katelyn Smith with me, with Smith Composting, and I've known Katelyn, I want to correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe like 10 years now. Has it been?
Yeah.
I mean, back in the like Suntan City days, is that right?
Tan World days, yeah.
Tan World! Oh my God. Date us even more. I forgot.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, back, I think I started working there when I was 18 maybe. And then I don't know when you came along. Oh yeah, I was there for like 7 years, believe it or not. I was obsessed with tanning.
Yes. I started when I was 16, so I'm 26 now, so 10 years ago.
That was, yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy. So, okay, what I want to do for our listeners, because neither one of us are at Tan World or Suntan City anymore, I would say a whole hell of a lot has changed in the last decade.
Yeah.
So, can you go ahead and like introduce yourself? Let us know kind of who you are and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I'm Katelyn Smith. I'm the owner of Smith Composting, and what I do is I take in local food waste from our community, and I feed it to worms, and then the worms break it down and create castings as an organic fertilizer for your plants.
I am obsessed with learning about all things composting and gardening, and I've been gardening since I was able to walk, basically, but it was more of a chore than it was a treat. Like growing up, it was like, we gotta go weed the garden. You're in trouble. Go pick rocks out of the garden, and now I'm like, oh yeah. So like gardening, I always like despised gardening because it was like punishment to me, right? It's like middle of summer, it's like 1,000 degrees outside. I'm young, and the last thing I want to do is go pick weeds out of a garden or rocks out of a garden. So it took me so long to get into like the mindset of I love gardening, and that's really happened over the last few years. And like this year, just really diving into even like the whole composting and natural fertilizer and all of these things, and which led me to you and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So how did you get into this? Like, what's the backstory?
So I like to start when I was young, like you, but I had a way better relationship with gardening. So my mom never really gardened, but whenever we went to go visit my great grandma, she had almost her whole yard was filled with fruits and vegetables. And I just have such vivid memories of picking raspberries with her. And I just cherish those memories so much. And as I got older, I kind of got away from nature. And then it wasn't until I was 18 that I started hiking again. And that really catapulted me into who I am now. And it awoke that childlike curiosity about nature all over again. And it was a really beautiful moment. And so I started living a low waste lifestyle because I realized my actions, I advocated so much for the environment, but at the same time I was ruining the environment. So living a low waste lifestyle led me to composting. And then out of anxiety of not doing enough, I decided to work with my sister who works at a grocery store and take in food waste. And that's how Smith came to be.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's talk about, there's so much that I want to ask you. So the first thing I want to ask you is, tell me about hiking and how that has reconnected you with nature. This is something I've always wanted to do, and I've taken like nature walks, but I've never actually like gone hiking. So I'm very curious about that.
Yeah. So a little like back to when we first met at 16, I was diagnosed with major depression and severe anxiety. And I did therapy. I've been in and out of therapy since, and I'm very open to talking about that. And I remember the first time I went hiking, everything just completely like stopped. And that was the most at peace I had felt in years. And it's going to make me emotional, but it just connected me so much. And then to take a break away from society, away from people, and just notice a butterfly landing or the way the sun shines peeking through leaves and just golden rays, it's just such a spiritual and connective process for me. And it became so much part of my life that I actually set out and climbed a mountain in Alaska. I was like, I'm going to hike and I'm going to train. And I went and climbed a mountain. in Alaska. And that was so much fun because we slept on the beach. I slept in cars. It was just 12 days of pure nature. And I had breakdowns. It's difficult. The sun didn't set and it rained. But just throwing yourself out there is so much fun.
Oh my God, that is totally something that I would love doing. I would love to do that. I don't know why I've never done it.
You should. We have so many different nature preserves around Sioux City. Oh, I'm sorry, my dog has her toy. I'm gonna have to take that. We have just an array of nature preserves around us. There's actually one that they have wild roaming buffalo, and
it's up
I've
by
been
me
able to
actually.
see 'em. Is it?
Yeah, there's buffalo. I love. If you've ever talked to my husband, I actually have an obsession with buffalo. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because like they're still so, I don't know, like close to nature in the sense that like they're wild around here. Like we don't like hunt them. We don't do things. They seem like that magical mystic creature, you know, same thing with like horses to me. They're that like magical mystic creature, even though that like I very much have like a partnership with like the equine species, but buffalo, they just, that just fascinates me. And we have one, reserve or preservation, I don't know what you call it, like 10 miles maybe south of me, and sometimes you can see them from the road, and I am like a kid in the candy store when I see I'm like, my whole day is back. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it because
Yes.
I get so giddy.
Yeah, we are so lucky to live so close, and not a lot of people know about it. I only found out because the Girl Scout camp that's located around there, my husband and I were going to get married there. I wanted to be out in nature, and that little chunk of land in our community, it doesn't feel like you're in Iowa. It doesn't feel like you're 5 minutes away from the city. It's so, it's just gorgeous out there. I love it. So yeah,
my
I'm
husband
the
goes
same way.
hunting out there too.
Oh, but you actually, so when I was 18, maybe when I was 19, you talked me into working at Midstep.
I did.
Yes, I was at Suntan City and I was wanting a better paying job, and you're like, hey, why don't you come work for me? And I was like, what do you do? And you said, it's just everything you do in a day, but there's someone there to help you. And
Yeah.
so I did it, and I loved it. On my first day, I thought I was really crazy, but that actually really contributed to changing the way I viewed my life. Also, working with people with intellectual disabilities is one of the greatest jobs I've had.
I did not know that was like such a moment for you. I absolutely loved working there until shit kind of went sour, but there is something so beautiful about being able to be there and just help people be people. And it's like in a non-judgmental way. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's just like bringing everything back to the basics and just being happy to be alive and not have to worry about all of the stupid things that we as people in our, you know, quote unquote busy lives or like society, like we worry about things that just are so ridiculous. And it just really helped ground me. Like I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be able to like be with people who love people and who are genuinely happy or just able to express their emotions, because you know that some days it was like shit hit the fan. Literally.
Oh my gosh. So I've had cups thrown at me. I've had shelves thrown at me. I've had a chair thrown at me. I have been punched in the nose. But it's all okay. Like, I know that we say that. And
I'm like crying. I'm laughing.
But it's like I maxed out every week in overtime. So I was there 65 hours a week from the time they woke up to the time they went to bed. And when you tell people like, oh, I've had cups thrown at me, they're like, oh my God, why would you ever work there? But it's like you get mad too, and you wish you could throw a cup. They don't have that barrier. Like, you wish you could throw a shelf at someone you don't like working with you. Like, they just don't have that barrier to be like, no, that's not okay.
Yes, I love that. It is. It's just like you're able to be a human at like the most basic sense and be able to express your emotions without really giving a shit what anybody else thinks. And there's a sense of freedom within that. And I think that I long for that. I'm still trying to find that as a human that I am today. And each day
Yeah.
I get a little bit closer to, you know, expressing yourself on how you really feel, or like speaking your truth, or speaking your mind, whatever you want to put there. Man, I didn't even think we'd go there, but that's
Yeah.
incredible. I love
Well,
that.
that was such a pivotal moment in my life because I think the direction I was going, it's so crazy to see how life like sets up chapters for you and you
Hmm.
don't even realize it. But I was at a moment because I was working at Sephora also and at Tan World or Suntan City. And those two jobs are very like itemized, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy
Hmm.
this. And it was conflicting with a lot of how I was feeling in my own morals because I didn't feel comfortable selling an $80 bottle of lotion. I don't even want to buy an $80 bottle of lotion. I don't even buy anything brand new now in my personal life. So there was a lot of conflicting feelings. And then just
Hmm.
with you being like, hey, do you want to work here? So you came into my life as a sign. And then I took it, and that working at Midstep really kind of tore down all those, that the bullshit that's surrounding society.
Absolutely.
And I think I needed that at the time of my life because I was fucking crazy. I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast, but
You can cuss, you can say as
oh,
many F words as your heart desires. It's totally cool.
I was fucking crazy when I was a teenager. I needed that. So, and you almost got me to play or roller derby. I was really interested
Yes,
in that.
yes. You would have been
Yes.
so kick ass at roller derby.
Yeah,
No
it's
offense, but like
just
you got that big old booty, you could have knocked some bitches down. Oh man, that would have
no
been
offense
awesome.
taken. Yeah, I really wanted to do roller derby. That would have been so much fun. But it's so crazy because just people are put in your life at the right moments you need them, and you just have to be open to the journey.
Absolutely. So this led you to more of a you called it low waste. I
Yeah.
think your low waste would be maybe my minimalist mentality, but can you talk to
Yes.
us about low waste, what that means, and kind of like what steps you took to become that?
So as like just a general consumer, you're taught to recycle. You're taught, oh, I can purchase all this plastic all that I want, and as long as I'm washing it out, most people don't even wash it out. You're supposed to wash
Hmm.
it out, put it in a recycling bin, put it on the curb, and it's gone. And we have this disconnect to how it even gets to our shelves, the workers that it goes through the hands. And right now during this pandemic, we're seeing a lot more of that background behind the curtain. But I thought that was how to be eco-friendly. But in actuality, only 9% of all plastic ever created has been successfully, or not composted, I'm sorry, recycled. 91% of it is ending up in our waste streams, it's ending up in our oceans, it's breaking down into micro pieces. Rolling Stone just had an article, it was a month ago, that now on average, humans are eating a credit card worth of micro pieces of plastic a week. That
I
used to be
believe
a
that.
year, and now it's jumped up to a week. And so learning all that, and I just was like, I'm not living the way I want to live. I'm not protecting at the same time ruining. So I kind of did my best to nix all plastic, and that's really difficult because we don't live in the society that allows that. So, and a lot of people don't even have the financial means to purchase sustainably. They don't have the financial means to be able to choose glass over a plastic item that's
Mhm.
$2 more. So it is definitely a privilege to be able to support sustainable brands, but at the same time, living low waste to me is not buying anything brand new. So I haven't bought a brand new item of clothing or home decor in 2 years. Everything I have is thrifted. A lot of my, no, all of my jars, I'm sorry, come thrifted. I actually go to a thrift store that at every single hour, whatever's not sold gets directly taken to a dumpster to be sent to a landfill. And so that's another way my company takes things out of the waste stream. Um, and just I think living low waste is living gently and kind of just being aware. I think it definitely goes hand in hand with minimalism. Um, and it's just breaking down the society norms because how do companies get you to buy something? They make you not like what you already have. Um,
Yep.
and so it's just stepping away from the mass consumerism.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I know there's in my personal life, there's definitely room for improvement because I still do buy new stuff every now and then. But even like with talking with you and some of the other people, if I have something that I could modify to reuse or repurpose or just what's another word, renew, reuse, repurpose, yeah, that so like make it new again or reuse it for something else, repurpose it for something else. I try to, and actually people give me shit when they come to my house because I am not one for home decor. I actually just started like purchasing like house plants because I wanted to bring more nature. I want to feel more grounded, so I'm like, okay, that's something that I could like justify spending money on. But like if you walk through my house, I have not one piece of artwork up.
I don't either.
I have none of that crazy fancy stuff. I think I have like a couple of clocks. I have a couple of mirrors. I have a couple of like vision boards, but as far as like art or like just meaningless pieces, nothing. Or just like, I just bought this because it looks cute. I have almost zero of that.
I feel the exact same way as you. So this is thrifted behind me. You can see me on the Zoom. I have a mirror that I thrifted from my favorite thrift store. And I get these really conflicting feelings because I do feel like I want things, like advertisements definitely work on me, and I have to sit with those feelings. I'm like, okay, why do I want this? It's because I don't like how my home lives. Well, why don't I like the way my home lives? Because an outside source. And there's a lot of uncomfortableness to sit with it. I actually went through, I think it was a year and a half ago, I started to step away from wearing makeup. And it's crazy how you feel as a woman not professional by not wearing makeup. And
Yes.
I really struggled with it, but I was like, men get to just wake up and go to work, and I want that same thing. I have things I want to do in the morning. Every morning I wake up and I lay with my dog for a few minutes. Like, I'd much rather hang out with my dog than worry about putting on makeup. And so really breaking that down, and being comfortable, and it all comes from within.
Absolutely. I was just listening to a podcast before this, and this is kind of on like the men women thing that you just touched on. And and that's just how like as women we're thought that like we're marketed to or targeted at to feel less than, and that we need this product to feel better about ourselves. And even like the same thing with money. This podcast was talking about like Forbes top 100 or something like that, and how men are like, no, I made more money than what you put in there, and I want you to put me on this and this. And they're just very like in your face, like demanding about like what they want. And then women on the other side are like, no, don't put that I was successful, because then people will judge me for being successful, or things like that.
So I just wrote an ebook all about vermicomposting, and I had my husband check it all, and he said to me, he said, you put a lot of fluffers in your sentences. You're not very like, you're the expert. You need to be very matter of fact, but you put just add, or he's like, take out the just, take out the alsos. You're going to add. And I think that's a very womanly thing to do, is to add so many fluffers, because we're so like, I mean, you can do it. And I think as a woman, being very direct, like, this is what I want, is intimidating to a lot of women, because for so long we're taught to be timid and to be like, oh, sure, whatever, I'm fine, let's do it. Like,
Yeah. And I think that's probably one reason that women who are direct are called bitches, or they're called, bossy, or they're called, intimidating, or all of these words. Whereas like if a man, and this is so crazy that this conversation is going this way, and then we can kind of like bring it back. But I could like talk, like I get fired up about this stuff, as you can't tell. But like if a man were to do that, he would be like, yes, he's so strong, he's so competitive, like I want to be like him. But if you do it as a woman, it's like, you throw rocks at her and tell her that she's an asshole. It's just
or
so
why is
crazy
she trying so hard?
Yes.
Yeah. Why is her problem? Why is she trying so hard? Yeah.
I have easier going. Go with the flow.
Yes, I have an issue with that. That's something new about myself. I love working on myself, and that's
me too.
It's like, it's addicting once you start unraveling your roles, and you're like, more. So when I'm not, I'm like, something's wrong. I'm being stagnant, and that's something I've talked to. We can come back to this, but that's something I've talked in therapy about for years. That I had this feeling that I wasn't doing. Like I was afraid of a year passing by and me not doing anything. But as as a business owner and running your own business as a woman, that's something that I've stepped into, is working with other companies and being able to say, this is what I'm offering, this is how it's going to be. And that's so uncomfortable for me, and that's something I'm really growing into because I have to. Nobody's advocating for my business, so that's something I definitely have to grow into.
It's a process, just like anything else, and you're peeling back the layers of the onion, and you don't even know that they're issues until somebody says something and you're like, ooh, that was weird, what was that feeling? And your body will tell you when something's uncomfortable, and then that's kind of when you gotta run towards it and figure out what the hell it is. Otherwise you're going to sit there until you figure it out, and the universe is going to keep throwing you the same problem same problem
Yes.
until you figure it out. And a lot of times it's just listening to what your gut is telling you, and going with what you know is best for you, and not modifying your path based on other people's expectations. It's just, but that comes back to the being more direct. Like, if this is something that you know is going to work, speak that. Don't change it just because somebody else wants you to do it a different way. And a lot of times that can be hard, because if you're a trailblazer, or if you're the first person in your family, or if you're the first person to do something different, being different is hard, and people don't like different. People like things to stay the same, which is so funny, because the only constant thing in life is change. I mean, look around us. Nature changes every day, every month, every year. Like, the earth changes, everything changes. Yet as humans, we get really single-minded, where we're like, nope, everything's fine. Everything's fine. If I just put my blinders on and, keep doing the same thing over and over and over, you create chaos and insanity in your life. And then you wonder why you're anxious, or you're overwhelmed, or all of these things. And it's because you're not actually fulfilling your soul's purpose.
Yes, I love that. I completely agree. Yes.
I just kind of went off on a tail,
No, I
a
love
little
it.
rant there.
That's exactly how I feel. That's amazing.
So let's okay, so you're living low waste. You're and I'm just kind of like bringing things back. So you're living low waste. You're taking things from the grocery stores. And how does that how do you go from living low waste to creating Smith's composting and teaching other people on composting? And then I do want to talk about your book, because I want a copy, and I don't know if it's available yet, so we can chat about that kind of towards the end too.
Okay. Yeah, so living low waste, I started composting with just my husband and I. But like I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. And I think those are cues from the, that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's do some more work. And my sister came to me about this idea of taking food waste, because she works in the produce section of a grocery store. And so
Okay.
she's like, you would be disgusted to see how much stuff I throw away every single day. And she's like, things that are perfectly fine, they might have just a bruise, but they're ugly fruit, which is a problem in America, and nobody will buy it, so they have to throw it away. And so she collects them for me, and then I pick them up, and now they know me as Worm Woman when I go in.
I love that.
Um, and so I bring home the food waste, and I give it a chance, because when you throw food waste in and send it to the landfill, it does a few things. So it releases a methane gas, which is very potent at collecting heat. So that
Mm-hmm.
is contributing to our global warming. Another thing that sending your food waste to the landfill is it's taking up space in the landfill that it doesn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that it's not really touched on, but to create a landfill, they need to tear down nature and the natural world and keep moving forward. So if we can stop that, or
Oh,
at least slow it. And then
hurts
another
my
thing,
heart.
yeah, another thing that happens when you send your food waste to a landfill is it has the potential of creating harmful leachate runoff. And what that is the liquids that are excreted from their food waste will interact with hazardous materials, metals, and create this harmful liquid that then is absorbed into our soil and into our waterways. So we are actually poisoning ourselves and our planet by just choosing to toss our food waste instead of composting it.
This makes me feel like I'm not like, I like want to just like slap my own wrist and be like, shame on you, Sasha. Like, you didn't know that you were doing, I mean, and I'm still very new to this, and I try to do like recycling and reuse. And, you know, I like to throw, like the fruits and veggies and things like that, like outside, or give them to the horses or give them to the dogs, or just, you know, whatever. But it just sounds like I can even be doing more. Like, you can always be doing more. So, okay.
Always.
Oh, this is just insane. I didn't know anything about like the runoff and the chemicals and things like that, but it all makes perfect sense. So, I mean, like at its core, I mean, we're literally poisoning our earth by throwing everything together in a landfill. And that just like, have you ever seen a landfill? Have you ever been to a landfill?
Yeah, I have a friend that I did a photo shoot with, and I was doing like a nature one, and it was funny because I was facing the landfill, and it was just heaps and heaps and heaps of trash and rubbish, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm like trying to be all spiritual in the nature, and I'm just looking at a landfill, and I loved it. I was like, this is my life in a nutshell, honestly.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's so sad. And
it is sad.
the things people think about throwing away. I was watching an IGTV or an Instagram live the other day, and this girl was like, "I thought I threw away that hat," and the husband was like, "No, I'm wearing it." And I was like, "Why would you even throw that away in the first place?"
Yeah, I don't throw clothes and stuff away like that. They kind of go through a process in my house. If I can use them as like cleaning rags or something like that, then I will. Otherwise, I always just donate them somewhere. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else you do with them. I don't think I throw away clothes though. I either reuse them, and then, yeah, I have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I learned along my low waste journey is so clothing that's been produced since maybe the 80s, it was since the Jane Fonda phase and the spandex
Mm,
phase. Those are all comprised of synthetic fibers, and those synthetic fibers are made up of plastic. So every time you go and you purchase from fast fashion, your clothing is not 100% natural fibers. Every time you wash that shirt or that pair of pants, it releases micro pieces of plastic into our waterways. And then you take it and then you put it into your lint, and then it sheds even more plastic. So that's another way plastic is sneaking into our lives.
oh my goodness. Okay, so first let's talk about, I do want to touch on the clothing, because I know that there's a lot of people out there listening to this who could benefit from that. I know I personally could benefit from that. And I try to buy organic products, which I didn't even know organic like clothing was a thing until like a year ago. But let's talk about food waste, or just waste in general, and what you can do instead of just like tossing it in the trash. Like, where do you separate? Kind of walk us through what you do in terms of throwing things away or
So
composting.
yeah, I have 20,000 worms in my house. But it's very easy for me to compost. But if you're starting out new, I do worm composting. And why I choose to do it that way is because I want it to be as convenient as possible. I know I'm lazy, and it needs to be convenient for me to stick with something. So I have a worm bin in my dining room to make it convenient. And what I do is, as I'm cooking dinner or as the toilet paper runs out, I collect those pieces in a little container. And those actually can go in your freezer. And at the end of the week, I take it out of the freezer and feed into the worms. Or you can take it straight into your worms.
Okay, so what does worm composting do? I've been watching you, so I kind of know, but tell us about these, are there red wigglers, right? Did I get
Yes,
that right?
yes, red
Okay.
wigglers. Yep.
Tell us about your worms and how that whole composting process is.
So I feed that waste to the worms, and what the worms will do is they'll work really hard at eating it. So red wigglers are not like the night crawlers that we have in most of North America. Those night crawlers like to live beneath the top 6 inches of soil, so they're not going to be good at eating. Red wigglers like to live in the top 6 inches, and they love eating decaying waste. So what I do is I make a 6 inches roughly to start out of bedding, and I put in about 1,000 worms, and I slowly begin to feed them because they're new. And eventually they'll actually double their population every 90 days if the space allows. Yeah, and they just work hard to eat. That's all. They just live to eat. And Another thing that's really cool about worms, and we discussed putting them in our raised beds, is
Hmm.
the way that they breathe is through their skin. So as they're breathing, they actually release carbon dioxide. So it's aerating your soil much like a houseplant or a tree does. And so that's just an added bonus. And their poop, their worm castings, are the waste broken down. And that is like Earth's best fertilizer that is going to feed your plants organically and naturally.
Okay, so this bedding that you put, and you just have, I think I've seen your containers. You just use like, I guess I don't know how many gallons there are, but like plastic tubs.
Mhm. So there's
Okay,
a lot of different ways that you can build. You can do a wooden box or a plastic storage bin. I use about 30-gallon. I thrift mine
okay,
because I'm in the long haul. Wooden bins will actually break down in about 3 years, and that's what
that's what
you
I was
want with
wondering.
composting.
Okay.
Um, but because it's an organic material and it's constantly being in touch with moisture, and eventually the worms will like start to eat the wood as it decays. That's beautiful. That's part of the process, and that's ultimately, I just choose to use plastic because I want to keep my containers for as long as possible.
Yeah, well, and you have a business out of it, so you probably, I don't know if the ROI is quite in it if you're continuously like building new wooden containers.
Yeah.
So okay, so what do you use for the bedding? Because like bedding to me, like I use like wood chips for my chickens, but I'm assuming worms don't want that kind of bedding.
No, so worms actually, you can do it completely zero waste by just using some shredded paper and some shredded cardboard. I like
Oh.
to use coconut coir because coconut coir, it kind of takes the think work out of maintaining moisture. It stays light and fluffy and retains the perfect amount. I've practiced with just paper and cardboard, and that one you have to maintain the moisture a little bit more because it can dry out on the tops. And what will happen is your worms will still be trying to float around in there, and they'll get caught in the dry spots and die. Uh,
Mm.
so it's just a little trickier to maintain. I just prefer coconut coir. It's the easiest. So I do a brick of coconut coir, and then I always add in some paper, some cardboard. And then worms are really cool because they're like chickens. They need a grit to break down their food waste because they don't have teeth. So they
Yeah.
need either a coffee ground or a fine sand or crushed up dried eggshells to work to break down that food waste as it goes through their body.
I've heard of the eggshells thing twice now in this last week because you know me, I'm on my whole like chicken journey. Well, I've had chickens forever, but this is like the first time I've had them as like my own, not part of like my parents' farm. And I was looking at how I could repurpose eggshells, and there's several things. And I guess I did not know that I can use them for my worms. So,
Yeah.
okay. So where do you get coconut coir?
Just most pet stores. I go to Petco, PetSmart, and they have
Okay.
it's in their reptile bedding. And actually, so coconut coir is unique, and why I choose coconut coir over peat moss, because peat moss is a very popular one, even
Yeah.
in potting mixes.
Yep.
So coconut coir comes from Sri Lanka. It's a from their coconut waste industry. So a lot of our coconut products come from that island, and the coir that I use comes from the waste of that industry. And so that's why I choose to use it over peat moss. Peat moss is actually, it takes about 20 years to fully regenerate, and it's just as effective as trees as absorbing the gases from heating up our planets. So I'd much rather leave peat moss to do its thing and absorb the heat and use waste.
That makes perfect sense. So is all coconut coir come from there? Is there a specific brand we should be looking for?
No, it's just a gigantic chunk. They're the biggest manufacturer of it.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to get that instead of this freaking peat moss. See, I'm learning so much stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you let's talk about where you get your worms and kind of how they start to compost, what that looks like, and then what you do with it afterwards.
So I get my worms from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. I've had really great success with that company. I've roughly purchased about 10,000 from them, and it's been consistent across the board. It also comes plastic free, so I don't have to worry about any excessive plastic, and it actually comes wrapped in newspaper, so then you can compost and feed your worms the newspaper. Um, And once you have your bedding all set up, you'll just add in your worms, and then you want to feed them slowly because it's their new home. You don't want to freak them out and put too much moisture and throw off, because you're creating a complete new ecosystem for them to live in. You're trying to imitate what would naturally be out in the wild. So you want to get them time to acclimate and get used to their space. And I recommend maybe a few weeks, and in that time you can freeze your food waste. Um, and then after a few weeks, just go ahead, you can go crazy and start feeding them. The one thing with your worm bin is you want to maintain, so your greens to your browns, so your carbon to your nitrogen. Your nitrogen is your food waste, and your carbon is your cardboard, paper, and your browns. So your bin should maintain about 70% carbon and 30% nitrogen. So as long as you're keeping that ecosystem cohesive, they'll be happy worms. And they're very durable. Like I was reading a book about composting, and they were saying how this woman was gifted red wigglers as compost. She put it in her greenhouse, left it for 4 months, came back, and the whole bin was turned. And she was like, okay, so they'll survive. They're very durable. They can take a beating.
Is there a specific temperature that they like? Because I know, I mean, I don't know if you want them outside, because I mean, I was thinking about putting them in my raised beds, but then what do I do when fall comes around?
Yeah, so they like to roughly live between 95 degrees and then down to 33 degrees. So they can live outside. Mine actually, I just brought mine out for the spring, summer, fall, and then I bring them in before the first frost. But there are different ways that you can successfully maintain your worm bin outside. Like during the summertime when it gets really hot, I have mine in a full shade spot, and I actually I thrifted a bunch of Tupperware, and I make gigantic ice blocks, and I leave it in the container, and then I just bury it in the morning, and it kind of maintains the temperature in their bins. And then during the winter time, and this is all in my ebook, you can build an insulation box. So those big panels of insulation boards, you can purchase those and build a box to put around it, and then put a quilt on top, and it'll maintain your bin for you.
By the end of the year, I'm going to have so many worms. I'm going to take this whole composting thing to the next level.
I love
this.
It is so
so
cool.
exciting.
Yeah. They can eat so much stuff. The list of things they can't eat is so much shorter than what they can.
So what are some of the things that they can't eat then? Like, what would you not throw in there?
So this is a surprising one, and this one I did some research on, but lint is one of those things that they cannot ingest, and it is because of all the synthetic fibers that fast fashion produces. So that lint,
sense, though.
Yeah, it's actually just a bed of plastic, and they can't eat plastic. There's a new PLA bioplastic that's really popping up on the markets, which is fantastic. I think it's a great avenue to go down, but I don't think it's just there yet. And it's because most people, to break down PLA bioplastics, you have to be able to send it to it's a hard word for me, municipal
Sure, that sounds good.
facility, and there it needs to be held for 10 days at 55 degrees Celsius, oh my goodness, to break down the molecular bond. They're big words. I know it in my head, but
no, I just love the realness of this, because I do this all the time where I'm like, I know what I'm trying to say. I just can't form the words.
So a lot of people are purchasing those compostable plastics, but a lot of us don't have access to holding it at 55 degrees Celsius for 10 days. And so that cannot be composted with your worms. And citrus is like pouring acid straight onto your worms. And because they breathe through their skin, it will burn them and kill them. So any citrus or any onions is a no-no.
Oh, that makes perfect sense, though, because I was just cutting up some lime the other day. I have like an obsession with guacamole, so I make it almost every week. And so I was cutting up fresh lime, and I was like squeezing it in the pico and squeezing it in the guacamole. And I had a cut on my hand from like gardening earlier. I like poked myself with a stick or whatever, and holy smokes, that was painful. So I can imagine that it would be equally as painful for a worm if you threw acid on their delicate little skin.
Yeah, I actually use my peels in a different way. So I soak it in vinegar to make a concentrate cleaner. But then also I love for my sinks and my bathtub tile, I'll take baking soda and I'll take the whole peel and I'll just use that as my scrubber. And the acid activates the baking soda and does wonders for cleaning.
Seriously?
Yeah, I clean all of my grout, all of my tile that way, and my sinks. It's wonderful.
And it probably smells amazing too.
Yeah, and then you don't have a rag to worry about.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's genius. And
Yeah.
okay, just like regular white vinegar, or what kind of vinegar?
Yeah, I use regular white vinegar, and what you'll need to do is completely submerge your peels. If it's any pieces that are um, peeking up at the top, they can actually produce mold, and then your whole batch will be ruined. So I just take any peel, like the more the merrier. It will smell delicious at the end, and let it soak for a few weeks, and then strain it out, and then you can mix that vinegar in with a bottle of water, probably equal parts, and create an all-purpose cleaner.
Gosh, that's genius. I love
Yeah.
it. I use vinegar for like the floors and like a cleaning, and I usually put like essential oils in there for. So this is just like taking it to even like the next level from there. So okay,
Oh
so what do
yeah.
you do with the peels when you're done with them?
Those ultimately have to be trash, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's what I okay. So that's I guess my next question is, what do you do with the things that are actually trash, or is there just like no way to avoid like sending things to the landfill?
So, unfortunately, in our society today, there is no way to live completely waste free.
Hmm.
I personally would get caught up in comparing myself to people who are like, I lived out of this mason jar for 2 years, and that's great. They live in places that have that accessibility. We do not living in Iowa. Um, so all that I can do is, as a consumer, to make better choices and to think before I purchase. And ultimately, yes, I send my trash can to the curb, but it's not weekly anymore. It's way more like 2 to every 3 weeks. And my husband does not live the same way as me. I just want to say that. He, I have like in our shower, I have everything package list, so bars of soap and steel razor, and he has like packaged bottled soap and conditioners, and that is totally okay because we don't need one person doing everything so perfectly. We need hundreds and hundreds of people living this way imperfectly to make a
Hmm.
progress. So if I can just inspire him, and he's so cute. He brings home coffee grounds from work. He was like, "Do you want me to collect coffee grounds for you for my job?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can do that." So he brings me home coffee grounds, and just it's seeing that independent changes in people is so much more rewarding than being like, "You need to do this. You can't buy the shampoo that you like."
Yeah, I think in just taking like baby steps, like we all have to do our part. And I think it would be unsustainable if you were to flip your whole world upside down and be like, oh, I'm going to buy all these bins and all these worms and I'm going to do all these things and da 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 da. And the next thing you know, you're burnt out trying to live a low waste lifestyle. And I'm sure you didn't just like flip a switch one day and get to where you are today, just like I didn't flip a switch and get to where I was today. We have these conversations and these people like you were saying earlier are brought into our lives for a reason, and it's because we're at that place in our life where we're willing to accept that advice and take that next step. So had you come to me or had I seen your stuff, 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, I'd have been like, sweet, so she has fucking worms, like what do you want me to do about it? But now I'm at a place in my life where I'm like, I want to live so sustainably. I don't want to have to rely on anybody to live, and I
Oh,
want to do all of these things. And so over the last few years, I've really been taking the steps to do those things. And I was literally just thinking about, okay, this garden, I want to have like the most organic fertilizer that I can, like, and I have horse poop and all that stuff that I use too. But I found your stuff and I had looked into like composting. And so it was just like, just like I showed up for you, you showed up for me in the right time in the right space. Otherwise, I would have not been able to have this conversation with you the way that we are.
oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
So I'm really excited for what the future holds. So yeah, it sucks that unfortunately I don't think our society is, like you said, set up for a zero waste lifestyle. And so this came to my mind when you were talking about that. And I think I know what you're going to say, but I want your opinion on it. So growing up, we did not have trash service, and we just burned everything. We had burn barrels. That's what we've always done. I've actually contemplated going back to this, but I have mixed feelings versus sending things to a landfill or just burning them in my backyard. So do you have any 2 cents that you'd like to add there?
I don't know. I don't know much about burning trash. I live in the city, and there's someone 3 houses down from me that does in their
See, and
backyard.
I didn't know if you could do it in town or not, because I
You
know that they
cannot.
have okay, so they do it anyways. Because somebody was like, I wish I could have chickens, but the city ordinances says that I can't do this. And maybe that's something I just need to do a little bit more research on, because I've been to landfills, and it's heartbreaking to see the things that people trash or the things that they throw away. And it's like, we're just using and using and consuming and consuming and consuming. And I know that part of that is inevitable. We as humans, like, that's our thing. We're consumers. But how do we start to consume less? And if just each person did a little less, Mother Nature, I think, would be able to kind of catch up and start to heal herself, which I think is what we're seeing right now with this like COVID epidemic. Is we're being asked to stop, to slow down, to look at our lifestyles, and to really say, like, what's working and what's not working, what's sustainable, what's not sustainable.
Well, and what's so kind of beautiful and amazing about this is, so I grew up and we didn't have a lot of money. And
Mm-hmm.
so living the way that I live now as a kid, I was like, I don't want to go thrifting. I don't want secondhand clothes. Like, my great grandma lived through the Great Depression. So I remember going into her basement and she just had racks, not racks, I'm sorry, shelves of food that she grew, she preserved. They had their own
Mm-hmm.
wine. And so that's something that's always been so big in my life. And as I became a teenager, I really was like, I want to buy everything new. I don't care. I want to be able to buy a $70 buy whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it really is just connecting back to what is my goal, what is my ultimate why, what future do I want for myself, but not only for myself, for my children and then their children. Um, this is already happening in my life. We're already seeing this warming. I don't want that to happen for my child. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
No, you're fine.
so it's definitely just kind of tearing back and seeing we're being mass communicated to at a rate higher than any other generation. Our grandparents didn't get advertisements in their face every couple minutes with all the
Mm-hmm.
screen time. And so just really coming back to your why and saying, I want to stand tall in who I am and my morals, and I don't need that.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautifully said. I think
Yeah.
it is. It's just, and even if you disconnect, so like this weekend, I did like a social media free weekend, which I used to do all the time, and I think I'm going to do more of, because I do feel just very flooded with information on things that I should have, or I could have, or if I had this, my life would be this much easier. And I think it gets us thinking to the coulda, shoulda, woulda, and then we start to feel bad about the things that we have, or lack thereof, versus focusing on what we have and the abundance and how grateful we are for the things that we have. And just setting those limits and those boundaries on how much you are being marketed to and how much you are being targeted to constantly consume. But if you shut that off, you don't have that, really that like red thing flashing in your face, like buy now, buy now, buy now. And it's the same thing. You talked a little bit about earlier not wearing makeup.
Mhm.
There was an experiment, and I don't remember who did this, but if you remove all of the mirrors in your house and just don't look at yourself, you will feel a million times better, because you're not constantly worrying about like, oh, am I dressing to impress? Am I looking this best? Or is this pimple on my face? Or is this eyelash out of place? Or da 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 da. And you start to just focus on how you feel versus how you think you look to other people.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're remodeling my bathroom at the moment. My husband is. He was like, this pandemic, we're doing some housework. So
Same
we're
here.
completely remodeling. And we had to take out our full length mirror and our scale, and it's somewhere else in the mist. And it's been since March 20th that I've been home and we've been working on this. And my body positivity and the way I view myself has gone up drastically. I just was thinking about that yesterday, how my sunburn is so bad on my back from working outside, and I was like, oh gosh, I haven't seen my body in like
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And So you take away that just sitting and nitpicking yourself, which is so unfortunate that we do that as humans. Um, yeah.
It is. It is. But it's a reminder to turn inward, and that you have everything you need right within you. You just have to shut off all the noise and know what you truly need versus what you already have. And not saying that like you should never want more, you should never ask for help, or you should never do these things, but just look at that thing and see how it makes you feel. And if it makes you feel less than, if it makes you feel constricted, if it makes you feel bad or anxious or nervous or just any sort of not like a feel good, I would turn it off and I would just get rid of it, like get it out of your immediate sight. And I would focus more on the things that make you feel expanded and loved and grateful and empowered and inspired, and focus on those things. And that's really been like a conscious effort on my own behalf to really get rid of all of the noise out there. That doesn't make me feel good. Like sometimes you even like the beauty products, right? I'm like, oh man, I wish I looked like that, or I wish I had that. And it's like, no, I don't need that to feel beautiful. I am beautiful. So therefore I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm going to follow this person over here who makes me feel a little bit better about myself. And even like around your household, hell, if you have to like get rid of all your mirrors in your house, go for it. I have a couple of full length mirrors. I don't ever really use them, but people would give me shit because in my bathroom, I just have like a little rinky dink medicine cabinet. And like, that's all I have because I don't really care. I notice if I have like these full length mirrors all the time, I will nitpick myself, and
Yes.
and it doesn't do me any good. It just makes me feel worse about myself. So I try to minimize my mirrors just so that I have more body positivity.
Yeah.
But before go ahead.
Who would have thought worms would have brought us to body positivity?
I know. I was just trying to like wrap this back because I'm like, God, we've talked from like men versus women to worms to composting to fruit and metal runoff. I'm like, this whole conversation has just, I fucking love this so much.
But it's life. Everything is connected. And that's something that if you get anything from the conversation today, it's that if you feel like, oh, it's just me, like it's just one plastic, imagine how much power one person has, how you really don't have to wait on anybody else to make those changes for you. You have so much power within you, and everything is so connected. We've gone from worms to, like, just how you said, everything in life is so connected, and every choice that you have is either going to ripple onto someone in a positive way or ripple onto someone in a negative way, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely.
There's a chain to everything. So life is so precious and so beautiful. And I just want to make my reality and my world and everything around me just as beautiful.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself. I wish I could give you a hug right now.
I know, when we saw each other the other day, I wanted to hug you.
I know, but I was like, there's so much shit going on. Is she going to be like creeped out if I just like grab her right now?
Oh.
So this is me giving you a virtual hug.
Oh, my neighbor, she's an old lady who lives by herself. We swap seeds. And yesterday, she's social distancing, gave me a dahlia tubers. And I gave her wildflower seeds. And she's so cute, but
I love that.
Yeah.
I never thought that I'd be like a hugger or a lover, but like the more I turn into myself, I'm like, oh, the more I just like love people for who they are, and just more accepting of myself and of others. And it just makes me that much happier too.
Yes.
And have these amazing conversations. So before we wrap this up, I do want to talk about your book, because I have been following you, like putting this together, and I'm like, I can't wait to read what she put on paper. So tell me about this book.
So my book is Vermicomposting, a guide to help you succeed at composting with worms. It is all of my knowledge about how to compost. So it's not just going to be a one-time read, turn it, put it away. It's going to act as a reference guide to help you throughout your whole journey of composting. So 2 months from now, you can come back and read it. It's going to help you from your beginning to the middle to end. There's troubleshooting questions. There's how to harvest, the different methods to harvest. There's different ways you can use your compost. So it's just filled with all the knowledge that I have to be successful with your worms.
How do we get this book?
My book is available at smithcomposting.net.
Okay. How much is it?
It's $15.
Okay, perfect. And is it available now?
Yeah, it just launched this morning.
This is perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I had a crazy morning, so
I cannot wait. As soon as I get off the phone with you and get these kids settled when I go back inside. Not that I'm like, my husband's in there with the kids. I didn't just like get the kids. He's in there with them, but he's already texted me twice. He's like, how long is your call? And I'm like, mind your business. You're being a parent. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just teasing him. But I'm going to have to go buy that book today because I just feel like I could pick your brain, but I would love to support you in any way possible. So, also, I want to grab those links from you so that people who are listening to this can learn more about vermicomposting. And then two last things. What do you want to leave listeners with? Like, what's the one big takeaway? And I think you already touched on this. So I don't know if you have anything to add there. And then how can they follow you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Smith's Composting, Facebook Smith's Composting, my website is smithscomposting.net. And the one thing that I wish to leave you with is to make your life as beautiful as possible and realize all of the power and all of the capabilities you have within you to make those changes to make your life as beautiful as possible and to ripple positivity onto others.
I love that. That's
Thank
beautifully said. Well, Katelyn, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day to do this podcast with me. It turned out better than I could have imagined. And I love just like going into these conversations and just trusting that what we need to say will happen versus having this big, long scripted conversation. And I don't think we could have had a better combo in this last hour.
It. Yes.